This story, so crazy. Panic is growing in Texas as at least 20 young girls from a summer camp along the Guadalupe River remain missing after catastrophic flash floods swept through the area. Desperate parents are flooding social media with pictures of their daughters and posting urgent pleas for information.
So this is when most folks bring up a bunch of stats about how this is connected to climate change. But it's 2025. We don't need to do that anymore. This is so tragic. And what I wanted to highlight today, along with sending y'all a QR code to send help to those families suffering in Texas, talk about what Trump's budget means for the climate and disaster response. So as I tease, I've been working on a breakdown of Trump's budget and its impact on America. But his budget is more than just a money document. There's a lot of policy changes hidden in there that have massive effects on our future. And one, this bill blocks the EPA's limits on CO2 emissions from existing and new coal and gas-fired power plants. They were working on limits that would essentially force the fossil fuel industry to call their own bluff. They said they could use this technology called BECCS, bioenergy carbon capture and storage, in order to generate zero emissions. So lawyers were saying from the EPA, if you can do that, then we can make a regulation around you doing that. Now, most of us in the climate space know that that isn't remotely economical, and the way better solution is using renewable energy. But the EPA still had the power to make that rule until now. This change alone adds 600 million metric tons of CO2 emissions by 2035. The Trump budget also gets rid of methane rules that would require oil and gas to detect, repair, and control leaks. Again, they got rid of rules that require the oil and gas sector to detect, repair, and control their methane leaks. Why are we letting these corporations just leak methane into the air, which is 80 times more greenhouse forcing than CO2? But another rule that this budget gets rid of, and that's another additional 200 million metric tons of CO2 by 2035. The equivalent of pushing 30 million more gasoline cars onto the road. This bill also halts federal agencies from taking climate change into account when thinking about the impacts of infrastructure, procurement, and permitting. Well, as we saw today, not taking climate change into account when you're permitting where a building is probably is a terrible idea. Oh, also, this bill ends the federal effort to require banks, insurers, and public agencies to account for climate risks in their loans. Well, unfortunately, tragedies happen, and they're going to happen more often. Why are we acting as if climate change doesn't exist? All this is doing is making it worse for people when these tragedies actually happen. Speaking of helping people and keeping people safe, this bill eliminates or drastically cuts so many of the federal efforts dedicated for climate resilience and adaptation. And you know what that includes? Grants for flood mitigation and infrastructure upgrades to help buildings to weather off extreme weather events that, because of climate change, are going to happen more often. By the way, because the federal government under Trump is trying to scam people wherever possible, they are stripping $100 million of federal funding allocated to help people impacted by disasters get legal assistance so they can actually get the benefits they need from their insurers who don't want to pay out. By the way, the National Institute of Building Sciences estimates that every dollar spent in mitigation saves $6 in future disaster costs. You're not saving anyone money by not thinking about climate change. There's so much more this bill does to gut investment into addressing climate. You can definitely call this the worst bill ever on climate in the history of the country. But the world doesn't stop. Climate change is here, and we can't give up on trying to figure out ways to combat it. And good news is, on the state and local level, there's still tons we can do. So I'll do videos about state and local level efforts, along with calling out the Trump administration for dropping the ball on climate change.